Hello, 87. I'm going to go over a few things today and then talk about science at the end. But before that, I'm just going to make some tea. So here I've got a mug thing with boiling water in it. And then I've got this tea bag where the tea particles have a high concentration. And right now, the boiling water has a low concentration. So there's a big difference in the concentration gradient. So I'll put that in there. We'll check on it in a bit. So to the school stuff I assigned today, math questions. I haven't seen any specific questions about how to do the work. If you've got questions about that, please let me know. I posted a short edit saying for the textbook stuff, I'd say if you feel comfortable with the work, start at the end of the section. And if you don't feel as comfortable, start at the beginning. If you've got specific questions, please email me. Language. Thank you to those of you that posted in the comments about the mosquito excerpt. If you haven't done that yet, but you have read the article, please post what hooked you, what made it different from other nonfiction articles. Science, keep sending in your questions. I'm looking forward to that interview on Wednesday with Nevada Belendra. Those of you that have sent yours in, thank you. If you haven't yet, do it. And Minecraft. I set up Minecraft on my Raspberry Pi for my kids yesterday and today. And I don't know if I'm doing it properly, so if you've got tips, if you know this is how Minecraft works best there, these are things they might enjoy, let me know that as well. That's sort of a personal favor. Okay, on to science. So we can take a look. So you can see that the water is getting darker and darker. Why is that happening? We're going to talk about that as we move through these slides. So let's go to today's slideshow. Oh, this is a little bit quiet. Okay, so this is a short slideshow, and it's a little more in depth with it without any pear decks. So let's go to the grade 7 stuff first. When you talk about interactions in the environment, grade 7s, one of the things to think about is how energy flows up the food chain. And we talked a little bit about this when we were researching the arguments around being vegan or not being vegan. But what this diagram shows is that as you move up the food chain from the producers to the primary consumers, the amount of energy kind of spills out as you go up. The rabbit eats it, but then the rabbit burns some off, loses some through heat, uses some in daily activities. So there's less available for the snake, who does the same thing, burns some off and digests it. And then up to the eagle at the top, it's the same thing. And you can see that the calories have been divided by 10 at each level. So those numbers are really round and easy to understand. But what it shows is that as you go up the food chain, up through the trophic levels, you lose energy. There's massive energy loss. So by the time it gets to us, energy is spilled out all the way along. Now, it's the flip side when we talked about it's the flip side when we talk about mercury levels, because as you go up the food chain, they get more and more dense. Flip to a different cycle. This is the carbon cycle. I recommend you watch this video at the bottom. I'm going to do a short explanation. This one's about 3 or 4 minutes long, and it does a much better job. Oops, one thing I forgot. If you want to learn more, section 5.4 in your textbook there about energy flow, and then 5.5 here about the carbon cycle. Well, basically what happens is there's carbon in the air, and plants absorb that when they perform photosynthesis. And then as animals eat those plants, when those animals breathe it out or digest the plants that they eat, they release it as methane or exhale it as carbon dioxide. It goes back into the atmosphere. That happens in the water as well. So the carbon cycle is going around and around. Now, not all of it gets used up. Lots of it from dead organisms and waste stays in the ground, and over millions and millions of years, that turns into fossils and fossil fuels, which is why we hear about the impacts of carbon on climate change, because that carbon has been stored in the earth for millions and millions of years, and just in the last 200 years we've started burning it at an incredibly fast rate. And that is why all of that it's the release of all that carbon that impacts climate change. And so it's not that carbon is inherently bad, it's that carbon is taking a long time to break down and to turn into fossil fuels, and as it gets burned, it's kind of an instant release. moving on to more about the food chain. This is about disruptions in the food chain, and we're going to talk a little bit about invasive species. So the one we're going to talk about is the zebra mussel. And what a zebra mussel is, it's almost like a little clam. It's about this long, 2 to 4 centimeters long. And I really recommend grade 7s or grade 8s if you're curious, clicking on those links, and especially this one here, invadingspecies.com. At the bottom, this zebra mussel fact sheet, if you click on it, oops, I guess I don't have it open. This zebra mussel fact sheet is really, really good if you want to learn more about them, which I recommend before doing the answer at the bottom. So what zebra mussels are invasive species? They're not natural to the habitat that they live in Ontario, and so they came across on boats, and now they're disrupting the food chain because, as you can see, if things get disrupted at a lower level down here in the producer, decomposer, or primary consumer level, well, then the other consumers higher up the food chain, they don't have their food source that they've relied on forever, and it's like taking the bricks out of the bottom of a pyramid. So if you take a look at this diagram, this is a diagram of a freshwater environment. You got a log at the bottom, you've got the fish swimming around, and you got algae floating in the water. Now that algae does two things. One, that algae is food for many different organisms. But what that algae also does is clouds up the water. And often we think of that as a bad thing, but this is the environment that these organisms are used to. They're used to a certain amount of sunlight getting through at certain levels and then eventually stopping. And that's kind of how they mark their territory within their habitat. What the zebra mussel does is it filters the water. Sounds good. It cleans out the algae. Sounds good. The water is more clear. More sun can penetrate what's called the water column. The problem with that is twofold. One, as the zebra mussels eat up that algae, the obvious one is that there's less algae available for those consumers that rely on it. Second one is that it clears up the water. And as it clears up the water, more sunlight is able to penetrate the water column, and that changes where fish are able to live. And that's a specific example of an invasive species. And your question, grade 7 at the end, is connected to that. What steps would you take to remedy the zebra mussel situation? Okay, on to grade 8, diffusion and osmosis. So now we go back to my tea. It's brown. It smells like peppermint or whatever. I'm not a tea expert. Yep, it's hot. It tastes like tea. I don't really like tea. What has happened here is this is an example of diffusion. And if we look at this slide, we can see that when molecules move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, that is called diffusion. And with the tea, that's exactly what happened. Inside the tea bag, it was high concentration. There were lots of them. In the water, it was low concentration. There were none of it. Over time, those molecules spread out. They wanted to diffuse. They wanted to make it balanced. And so they did. And as the tea steeps, it gets more and more even. With osmosis is the same. It's moving from an area of high concentration to a low concentration, but it's with water in particular. So not just not molecules of any sort, water alone. And when there's a lot in one area and not a lot in another, it wants to balance out. And that's an important idea when it comes to how cells work and how cells transport things around different organisms. For example, gas exchange in all types of animals. When I breathe in, my lungs fill with oxygen. My blood is pumping around my body. It wants that oxygen. But how does it get from my lungs to around the body? Well, it goes through blood cells. How does it get in the blood cells? This is where diffusion comes in. You've got these little sacs called alveoli on the edge of your lungs. When oxygen comes into your lungs, the alveoli fill up. They've got more oxygen than the blood cells beside them. So through diffusion, the oxygen goes from the alveoli into the blood cells, balances out. It then goes around the body, the muscles, the organs use up the oxygen, then they spit out carbon dioxide as waste. The blood cells pick that carbon dioxide up, bring it back to the lungs. You've now got all this carbon dioxide on the outside of the lungs, none on the inside. Well, it transfers again back through the alveoli. There's more carbon dioxide in the blood cells than the alveoli. It balances out. The alveoli give it in the lungs, and you breathe it out. And that's how diffusion works to help get oxygen around your body. In frogs, right here, it's done the same, except instead of going inside the body to the frog lungs, it happens through their epidermis. Oxygen diffuses into the epidermis, gets used up, and then carbon dioxide is diffused out through the epidermis after the organs and muscles in the frog have used up. All right, on to Dr. Cook. So this is Dr. Joda Cook, and this picture is bad of him. And he is a friend of Sheila, who's my wife, and he's an oncologist at Grand River Hospital. And when I reached out to him, said, "Hey, Joda, would you be able to record a video about cell reproduction, how cancer cells grow and reproduce?" He said, "Sure." And so this video is awesome. Dr. Cook did a great job. So please enjoy it, because it's really important for your question, the big question at the end there, grade 8s. I'd like you to submit this in the next day or two. Learning about how cancer cells reproduce. How do then doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals attack that process? And you can do this one of two ways. You can think of what you learned in the video, create your own solution, or think of what you learned in the video and then do your own research and let me know, based on what I learned about cell reproduction and cancer cells in particular, how do we address that? How do we attack those cells? Grade 7s, I want you to think about invasive species and the zebra mussel in particular. And I want you to create a 3-step plan with evidence for each step. How should we address this problem? And I've got a few little suggestions here. Do we want it to be about public education? Do we want to modify the habitat? Maybe introduce predators? Do we want to have human behavior changes? So limit the amount of the humans driving around and put boats between waterways and stuff like that? Or do you have any other ideas? So those are the two big questions. If you've got any clarification that you need or anything was unclear about this video, I think it's probably on the longer side. I haven't been timing it. Send me an email, post it in the comments. But please submit this. There'll be a copy for everybody. Put your answers in the slideshow and then submit it when you're done. If you want to see diffusion in action, make tea, ideally in a glass container. Ooh, it gets better the more it diffuses. See you 8-7.